Hey, folks. Hey, welcome back to the program. We do have a Conduit contributor on the line. Hannah Webb Howard is back with us. Hannah, how are you this morning?
I'm good, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's always great to have you. Now, I want to remind everybody you are in law school, so you're studying, cases and case law and all kinds of stuff. And so we want to utilize your expertise here and wanted you to address what's going on with the Supreme Court. Last week, they were hearing arguments over DACA, over these dreamers. And so what can you tell us about this case? What does it mean?
Sure. So I'm going to walk you through kind of a timeline of what this case is and what exactly the issues are that the Supreme Court's going to decide on. So essentially what is in front of the court right now are three cases rolled into one. So there was a case out of D.C., there was a case in New York, and there was a case in California, all the same case. And so the Supreme Court has said, okay, we'll hear all of these at the same time. So starting at the absolute very beginning, so we remember when Obama announced DACA, which is the Deferred Action Program, and that was in 2012 that he created DACA, which essentially was just, okay, children that have been brought into this country by their parents illegally, well, we're not going to deport you or take any action on your illegal status for at least 2 years. And then when that 2 years is up, you are going to have the chance to renew this deferred action. It did not grant them citizenship, and it did not grant them a path to citizenship. It was just like, hey, we're not going to deport you. And, we all remember the backlash when that happened.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, in 2014, right before the end of his term, Obama's term, he expanded DACA. So DACA was initially 2 years, and now they expanded it to 3 years before you have to renew it. And they kind of loosened up the regulations on who could qualify for DACA, so more kids could qualify to be in that class of people. And then they expanded it to parents. So they created DAPA, which was basically deferred action for parents, and it was those parents with their children that are U.S. citizens or their children were permanent residents. So they basically overhauled DACA and made it bigger. Well, when that happened, when this expansion and the new DAPA happened, Texas and 25 other states basically said, we've had enough, we're suing you. And so they sued the government to enjoin the government, which just means they sued them to make them stop doing this. They wanted to put the brakes on the DACA expansion and the new DAPA. And so they won. And the thing is they won substantively. So this wasn't, when the court, reached their final decision, they didn't say, oh, you did this improperly, go back and try it again a different way. They said, no, this violates the law. You cannot do that. But it was only the DACA expansion, and the DAPA, it wasn't the initial DACA. So since they won, Texas went back and said, okay, we're going after that original DACA. We're going to go after DACA in 2012. Because they essentially, what the court said in that case should translate to that 2012 program. They're essentially the exact same thing and the exact same reasoning. So they should apply, but of course, it doesn't apply until the court says it does. And so after this case, Trump was in office, and so Attorney General Jeff Sessions sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Security and said, hey, listen, these cases, this isn't legal. We've got to stop DACA. And so that was when Nielsen was the secretary. And so she sent out her letter that said, hey, listen, there's these court cases. We're not going to win in the courts on DACA, so we've got to roll it back. So they rolled back DACA, and we all remember when that happened. And so immediately after the DACA program was rolled back, well, then you had other parties suing the government again, essentially for the same reason that Texas sued the government the first time. Now these parties are suing the government again, just the exact opposite claim, saying, hey, you can't do this, you can't roll back DACA like this. So that brings us to the Supreme Court now.
Okay.
And there's two really interesting issues they're going to hear. So the first one that they're going to discuss is the government is arguing, listen, well, let me back up a little bit so this makes more sense. People that have sued the government are saying, hey, you acted arbitrary and capricious, and you can't do that. So what does arbitrary and capricious mean? Well, it's this big, fancy legal term that just says, hey, you're acting on your own free will, you're doing whatever the heck you want to, and you can't do that. And then their second claim is you were supposed to give us all this fancy notice and comment rulemaking, and you didn't do that. And so here are the government's two main arguments in front of the court. They're saying, well, first of all, the court can't even hear this case because everything that's happened, creating DACA, rolling back DACA, it's not the court's place to even make a decision on that. That's completely within the executive branch's discretion. And so the courts can't touch that. So that's their first argument. And their second argument is, well, even if you can hear this, we didn't act arbitrary and capricious. And so basically what the government has said, well, we're not wrong. But even if we are wrong, we still did it right. And that, and of course, that's always how it works. It's always how it works.
We're not wrong, but even if we are wrong, yeah, that's pretty good. That is typical government speak.
Sure. Well, and they're being good lawyers, if you ask me. And so that's what it is. And so, but here's what happens. So let's say the Supreme Court comes out and says, you're right. This isn't reviewable. This is totally within your discretion. Executive branch, you can do whatever you want. So that's a short-term win for people who disagree with DACA. So it would be a short-term win for the Trump presidency because he could roll it back if he wants to.
Yeah, and do a lot of other things. He could do a lot of other things that I'm sure the left wouldn't want him to do.
Sure. Well, it'd expand on his power, and that would be a whole new conversation that we'd have to have. How much does it expand on his power, etc. But it also means that just like he overturned Obama, somebody can come after Trump and turn around and overturn what he did.
Yeah.
Because that means, this whole policy, this whole conversation, whichever president's in office can just do whatever they want with regards to that.
So this case really has a lot at stake in terms of the power of the executive branch. I mean, I know you said it's a whole other conversation, but I mean, I think people on the left and right, if you're principled, you should not want the DACA to say that this was all, or the Supreme Court say that this was all in President Obama's authority. I mean, that's a massive expansion of his power.
It would be. It'd be a huge paragraph. And, there's always this constant struggle between how much power can each branch have. And this may be one of those times that, he can gobble up some power. So we'll see. Because the court can always come back and say, well, we can review this. This is totally within our branch. Our branch can review this. And, they could come back and say, well, listen, we can review this, but it's not arbitrary and capricious. So just keep doing your own thing.
Yeah.
And so that would also be a win for Trump. And they could even come back and they could say, we can review this, and DACA is illegal, which is exactly what they said with the expansion and the new DACA program. And so that's not, it seems almost like it's not going to happen because it'd be too good to be true for them to come back and say, oh, DACA is illegal. But it's really not that far-fetched of an idea. It would be completely in line with this precedent that they set just a few years ago. So it's a really interesting case. And each possible outcome has huge, I hate to say repercussions because that seems to mean that it's bad, but it has a lot of ripple effects.
Well, I look for the president, we would have already had a DACA deal. He gave the Democrats everything that they wanted, and then this court case in the lower courts, moved towards the Democrats' favor, and then they didn't want to negotiate, and I think it was because they would rather the DACA people be victims so that they can be exploited for Democrat power than actually try to fix the problem and give Trump the credit. But if the Supreme Court were to come down and say, look, Trump can end DACA if he wants, I look for the president to a lot of conservatives' dismay, to try to fix the problem, to try to grant some pathway to legalization. I don't know if it's citizenship, but legalization, but to also get border security, like real border security out of it, more than we already have. So that's what I look to happen. So, and that's, I think, what that would be a huge boost to the president, for the center of the country, if he were to do that. And it is an election year coming up, so who knows?
Well, absolutely. And so when Nielsen rolled back the DACA program, I think it was almost hey, Congress, do your job now kind of move, because she said in her memo when she rolled it back, this is not the executive branch's place to do this. DACA can still be a thing, but Congress, you've got to make it happen. Like, Congress, this is your job. And she said that when she rolled back DACA, but yet here we are, however many years later.
Here we are.
Nothing.
Well, Hannah Webb Howard, really appreciate you coming on. It's always great to have you on, and thanks for analyzing this case for us and telling us what's going on, and telling us what the stakes are, too.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Paul.
And back in just a moment, folks.